education activities such as the speaker series, the outdoor programs, youth programs, when we're allowed to meet in person, and community outreach, as well as conservation projects, citizen science, and advocacy. As an entirely volunteer-run registered charity as well, your membership contributes all the funds that we use to operate. So please do consider joining us. The membership year starts in September, but memberships taken out in June or even these last few days of May will be good for the entire following year, running from September 2021 to August 2022. So please do consider joining us. It's not very expensive, and you can join us easily online or with a check by mail. And if that's not something you're interested in supporting at this time, please consider a donation. We have several opportunities to direct charitable funds, and we of course issue charitable receipts. You can donate online at Canada Helps or directly from our website. I'd like to briefly announce what events the club has coming up in the next month. We usually do a in-person get-together in June. However, this year we'll be doing another virtual speaker series. This is particularly interesting to this group because it's another bird talk. Many of you will be familiar with the Vineland-based Owl Foundation. So I'm very much looking forward to hearing from Peter Tam on that subject. And coming up for the wildflower group, although this is of interest to all of our club members, it's also a very popular event, will be the virtual native plant sale. And the club ran this successfully virtually last time. It's a matter of reserving the plants you're interested in and then booking a pickup slot on June 12th. So please feel free to check out our Facebook page or email wildflower@natureguelph.ca for some details. Well, now I'd like to hand it over to Dean for the notable bird report.
Good evening, everyone. I have the honor of sharing the Wellington Notable Bird Report for May 2021. I want to thank all those that did send in some bird pictures because it's been a great participation this month. Remember what this is about? This is about sharing your sightings. They're ones you're to be proud of. They could be the first of the year. It could be your lifer. It could be one that you were shocked to see or one that just had a funny story. We don't care how you define notable, but we encourage you to share your photos. As a matter of fact, you can send your photos to birdwing@natureguelph.ca in the next month, and we'll be just share them in the next meeting. But you can also share them right now on chat. So if you saw a notable bird in the last month and you want to brag about it, by all means, write that bird into chat. If you know how, feel free to add a picture. And don't be shy about pictures. I know tonight's about bird photography, but we're a welcoming group and we welcome all levels of photography of birds. We just want to see birds. So Luke Rasso sent in a few pictures this month. First of all, he saw a northern water thrush at the rare property in Hermosa, as well as he, among many others, saw the black-crowned night herons at the pond near Costco. And we all had some great views, those of us who ran down to see those. Luke also saw the yellow-headed blackbird out on Wellington Road 26. I know I tried to go see this one and couldn't find it as well, but kudos to him and those that found it. And of course, he's also celebrating the fact that he found several clay-colored sparrows in a park near his home, I believe. So well done, Luke. Margaret saw a very tiny gnatcatcher on the 21st in South Guelph. So that's very cool. And add to your life list, congratulations, as well as the rose-breasted grosbeak. So a couple of great birds, so well done. Val has a story about the wild turkeys that started visiting her feeder as the snows were ending. As a matter of fact, this one tom turkey, as she describes, got so bold as it would knock the bird feeder with its head, as you can see how far that bird feeder is up in the air, to cause seed to cascade down so it could feed. So she had a good view of the wild turkey. Well done, Val. Marnine also is watching some ravens nesting nearby. So apparently, I guess just across from her house has this raven nesting and raising some young. So she gets the great privilege of watching them eggs hatch and the young being fed. So that sounds very exciting. Photo credits to Chris Sprague for the nice photos. Joseph Lamb has some beautiful photos of his osprey he set out on Watson Parkway. Well done. As well as this very tiny house wren, which he's had the pleasure of watching it gather twigs for its nest. So that's great. As well as, and of course, we're seeing lots of these, the Eastern Kingbird, but it's a very beautiful picture. Well done, sir. So again, I invite you next month to share your sightings to add birdwing at natureguelph.ca. So that's it for this month's Birdwings. I'll pass it back to you, Val.
Thank you very much, Dean, and thank you everyone for your contributions. Good. Well, the next segment of our regular meeting is an update on the Atlas, the Breeding Birds of Ontario. We call this segment the Tips and Ticks. I'm the regional coordinator in Region Wellington 47. I'm going to start with the tip. Many of you will have also seen Marianne Clark's video of a pine siskin feeding a fledgling at her backyard feeder. This could have very well been a notable bird because after the eruption of pine siskins this past winter, many stayed on to breed. Now you can tell that this is a pine siskin fledgling. The adult is on the right and the fledgling is fluttering its wings in the video. It's very, very attention seeking, and it's begging and being fed by the parent at the feeder. So this is what we call confirmed evidence of breeding, and it's very exciting to have now because it doesn't happen every year. Following the big eruption this winter, we had many stay on, many instances of birds being seen late in the year, singing, making territories, and eventually nesting. So we're lucky to capture that in this third Atlas of the Breeding Birds of Ontario, which starts this year. Because I wasn't as experienced with the pine siskin breeding, since it doesn't nest here many years, I did approach the Significant Species Committee, and I just wanted to let everyone know that the dates outlined in the Atlas are quite off. They indicated that pine siskin fledglings should be seen in late April, as this was, and even earlier breeding evidence, whereas the safe dates in the document says May 24th. So please, it's almost getting too late to see these, but please, if you see any evidence of fledged young, do record it and get in touch with me or a local atlaser, because that evidence is really very interesting. Then I guess for the ticks portion of the Atlas update, I will provide a little bit of a status update. Just a reminder that our region has a Facebook and an Instagram page for you to keep in touch with other atlasers. I'd just like to quickly review what's going on in Wellington right now. We have 31 squares, so we're quite a small region, but we have 99 people registered to report breeding data in Wellington Region. That's a lot, but you can help. Even each of the 31 squares has been assigned a principal atlaser, but everyone else is free to contribute their data through contributing checklists, which can be entered into the Nature Counts app or through the data entry portal on the web page. Nature Counts again. Checklists can even be imported from eBird if you've been recording breeding data. So the peak breeding season kicked off yesterday. but Wellington birders have been very, very active in the early breeding season. Already to date, we've had 500 checklists submitted from 52 individuals. Data's only been reported in 25 squares. The most commonly reported bird is red-winged blackbird, which curiously has only been in 23 of those 25 squares. So I'm not sure where they were on the day the atlaser was there. So far, we've reported breeding evidence of 143 species, so well on our way to meeting last year, or the last atlas's total of 179, I believe. There's so much data to explore. It's really very, very interesting. So I just wanted to draw your attention to the Ontario Breeding Bird Atlas website. And you can look at this data under the Explore tab. You can explore data summary, or you can explore species maps. And right now, Atlas data from 2021 is being updated twice weekly. So it's an almost real-time picture of what's happening. I just wanted to look at a couple of species, ones that we've already discussed here, although again, the data is interesting and available for so many species. This is pine siskin, the species I was just describing. Hope you can see this map, but Wellington Region runs from just south of Guelph, well, actually just east of Cambridge, all the way up to past Mount Forest. So you can see there we've got 5 or 6 squares with breeding evidence already. The green square, well, they're kind of gray. Gray squares indicate presence. The yellow squares are possible breeding evidence, but the red squares, or the orange, I should say, is probable. And it looks like we don't have the red square entered yet from Marianne's fledglings, because that would be called confirmed. So we're already doing better than the first atlas, which ran from 1981 to 1985, where just 2 or 3 squares had siskins. And the second atlas had a few more in the early 2000s. But you can see there is a void in northern Wellington there, up around Arthur, Mount Forest. Let's get out there and try and find breeding evidence this year, because we may not have a chance before the atlas ends in 2025. The second species I wanted to look at, which we've already discussed too, is the common raven. And this won't be surprising to those of you who've been out birding, but for those of us who've been birding for many years, this is an incredible expansion of the range of the common raven into southern Ontario. It's already been reported in 14 squares in our region, many with confirmed breeding evidence, with nests on silos in barns, and of course the one we saw in downtown Guelph on the ledge of a house. In the first atlas, there was virtually no breeding south of the Canadian Shield, and by the second atlas, the range had only slightly expanded to the very northern edge of Wellington. Now, these birds continue to expand, and it wouldn't surprise me to see them breeding in every square in Wellington Region by the end of the atlas in 2025. Well, that concludes the atlas segment. I'd like to now introduce Stuart McCannell. Upon graduating from the workforce in 2016, Stu decided to learn photography as a hobby, since it could be practiced year-round and would connect him with a community of active, enthusiastic people while learning this craft. Stu and his wife Linda each grew up on dairy farms and have an affinity for open spaces and nature. His photography not only satisfies a drive to learn new skills, but also allows him to share the natural world with others who may not have even noticed it. Stu feels that done well, it is a chance to amuse and amaze folk, and perhaps even motivate them to do the same. Besides serving as president of the Guelph Photographers Guild, Stu is an avid cyclist, fly fisher, kayaker, and gardener. And at this time, I'd like to turn it over to Stu.
All right. Let me see if I can share my screen. Would be the first major milestone.
Looks like we've got you. Thank you, Stu.
How does that look? Okay? Good, good. Okay, excellent. Good. Well, Val, thank you very much for that kind introduction. And thank to Patty for the invitation to come out and share this evening. I did not anticipate this many visitors, although I do recognize a bunch of names from the Guild and the Into Focus Camera Club. To start off with, I wanted to say that it's always great to be associated with groups like birders and photographers, where we can be described as being avid or enthusiastic or passionate, all the while hopefully not hitting obsessive. I have to watch that a little bit myself. So now in preparing this presentation, I was told to be careful that this is not a camera club. This is a birders group, but having seen some of the photos, there's clearly some very competent photographers in the group as well. But I've tried to focus the presentation at non-photographers or birders who are really just getting started at photography. A little bit of background. Now, Val started with a bit of information. I bought my camera in 2015. So I'm new to photography. I know I don't look new, but I'm relatively new. And the plan was when I retired in 2016 that I would have a hobby that I could pursue 12 months of the year. And so I set out to learn photography. So to help with that learning process, first of all, I started off thinking, well, I could teach myself, but it turns out I'm either not a good teacher or not a good student. So I needed to get some help. So I joined a couple of camera clubs and started with the Into Focus Photography Club at the Guelph Wellington Seniors Association, and also joined the Guild, the Guelph Photographers Guild. And I'm delighted at this community of folks who are very encouraging and are actually eager to have me encourage others as well. So it's a fun and educational place to be. Let me just see if I can get to the next slide here. Where did my cursor go? 2 screens is always a challenge. There we go. So I did set out to learn as much as I could about photography and then to simplify the process. And so that's the approach that I'm going to take to this evening, is what simplifications can I apply to this process of photography so that it can come down to being to the point of being an aha moment. You know, aha, I know what to do here. And that's hopefully where the direction we'll go. So my plan is to talk about the choices that I make and why, and then demonstrate that with lots of photos. So the picture's worth 1,000 words. I do have probably 1,000 words in here as well, but I'll try and run through that bit fairly effectively. One caveat I have to mention is that I'm a bit of a photographic omnivore, and that is that I will take a picture of anything that gets in my way. So I may have accidentally snuck in a couple of non-bird photos, and I hope you'll forgive me for that. Overall, my hope is that you'll enjoy the photography and perhaps pick up a useful nugget or two that you can use in your photography. So let's dig in. The plan for today is to talk about why take a photo. Let's start at the basics. What makes a photo good? What sort of obstacles we meet in our photography? I will take a bit of time to go over the basics of photography. This is probably review for a lot of people, but it's always worth talking about that, I think. I will touch a bit on post-processing. I'm not going to make that a massive topic. It's a rabbit hole that we could all get lost going down, so I'll be careful about that. I have a peculiar type of insanity in that I like taking pictures of birds in flight, and so I'm going to share some of that and the challenges that go with that. And I'm going to share a bunch of photos that hopefully will demonstrate the principles that I've talked about. And then we will open up for questions at the end. First, why take a photo? We all have our own reasons, but perhaps it's just to document a sighting, whether it's Patty's black and white warbler or whatever else that we're finding. Sometimes it allows time to make a detailed identification. So I'm not a birder. I'm a photographer who has been drawn to birding. So I'll go out, take pictures of birds, and then come home and pop open my Sibley's second edition, figure out whether I got a cedar waxwing or a bohemian. So that's a very helpful exercise for me. Perhaps we want to just tell a story of the habitat, of the nesting sites, of any of the birding behavior, whether it's identifying the fledglings or what have you. And then, as Val said in the introduction, it's an opportunity to share, to amuse and amaze friends. It always astounds me the number of people that are walking along trails with earbuds in, totally oblivious to the nature around them. And I share a fair bit on social media, Facebook primarily, in various groups. And it's really great to be able to open people's eyes up to what's around them. And some of them will actually go out and start trying to find the same thing as well. Maybe you want to create some art for personal enjoyment or to share with other people. So around my office, when I'm starting out, and as still to this day, it looks like there's a kindergarten student here. I got photographs all over the place, you know, look, mom, look what I did, sort of thing. So I have to have some fun there. Taking photos can be a great learning tool to improve your craft. Trial and error is a great way to learn. And the beauty of digital photography is that an error doesn't cost you anything. And every time I take a photo and I bring it home, throw it up on the computer, I ask two questions. What did I do well? And what could I have done better? And so it really does help facilitate the learning. I've got a way more non-keepers than I have keepers, and it's just part of the process that I've embraced. Maybe you take pictures to justify the money that you spent on your stupid camera. If you're married, this might be something you have to consider. I know I did. Maybe you just want to have fun. Again, my philosophy is the better we get at skill-based activities, the more fun it can be. I am convinced that a scratch golfer enjoys the game way more than those of us trying to break 100. So that's always a factor. So what makes a photo good? Just a couple of basics here. If you're taking pictures of something with eyes, animals or birds, then a sharp focus on the eye is where you want it. Even if the wingtips or the tail is slightly out of focus, people will recognize the animal or the bird and consider it to be a good photo. Additionally, if you can get a highlight or a sparkle in the eye, that makes it even better. Certainly, good natural color. If you've somehow got garish colors or something is off or it's silhouetted, then there's room for improvement. Certainly proper exposure on the photo is important, and we're going to go into that aspect in a little bit of detail in a moment or two. Composition that pleases the eye of the observer. So typically, it's me that I have to please, but if there are other people looking at it, then I want to make sure they get the same sort of sense of what I do. So there are all kinds of rules. Again, it's another rabbit hole that you can go down, talking rules of thirds and Fibonacci spirals and golden triangles and leading lines. And I'm not going to go into that kind of detail. I'm just going to sit at the basic level when I'm talking about composition. If you have a chance to isolate the subject, that means get close. You don't want a photo necessarily where it's a where's Waldo exercise. You know, honest to God, there's a bird in there somewhere. You want to get it and isolate it. And to do that, you need to get close. And with regards to getting close, you know, the basics are wear clothing that blends in with the environment. Leave your neon vest at home. keep your ears unplugged, listen to what's going on, move slowly, and get as close as you can. Alternately, and using the same techniques, get a longer lens so that you can zoom in on them and accomplish what you're looking for without frightening the birds away before you get close enough. If you can, reduce distractions. And depending on what you're doing, if there's a plastic bag in the tree beside, don't do that. There's a lot of busyness behind the bird, whether it's a cell tower or a transformer or whatever. Try to eliminate that, and that'll make it a tidier photo. And then ultimately, if the photo makes you happy, it's a good photo. So that's the basics of it. So what gets in the way? Photography is simple, or can be made simple, but it's not easy. It does take a little bit of effort to learn how to do it. It is a skill-based activity that requires an understanding of the basics to avoid frustration. Other things to get in the way is the camera manual. You buy a camera and you get a 600-page manual. It's a reference book. Don't read it. It's only if you can't sleep is it a good read. So don't be intimidated by all of the information in the manual. There's also the belief that you need to spend big bucks to even start, and that's the only way to get a decent photo, and that's simply not the case. One of the bloggers that I follow, a guy named Steve Perry, refers to the 84 rule, and that is that 80% of a good photo comes from 4 inches behind the camera. So it's not the camera that necessarily delivers the quality. Maybe birds won't cooperate. They won't sit still or come out of cover or low light. So you have to, be patient and be persistent. Maybe you don't understand bird behavior. Probably not this group. So, but if you were a neophyte just getting into bird photography, that would be something to study up on. Maybe you have a fear or a discomfort with poor performance. I like the philosophy that anything worth doing is worth doing poorly until you can do it well. And of course, there's a fear of switching from auto to manual mode on your camera. So what are the basics? We'll go through these relatively quickly. Certainly understanding exposure and the exposure triangle is essential. You need to have a fairly good handle on autofocus modes on your camera, and I'll talk about my go-to settings. Metering modes and why, I'm just going to touch on that. White balance is a thing, so that's something to understand a bit. Post-processing and composition are the basics of capturing a decent photo. All of this will lead you to what to do in the field with the gear that you have, so that you can improve your odds of getting the shot you intended to. Understand a little cause and effect. So let's see how quickly and painlessly we can get through some of this nitty-gritty stuff so that we can set it and forget it. So, I put up the photo of this lovely red-winged blackbird in the topic of exposure because they're typically difficult. They're blackbirds, and you often get them either silhouetted or the background blown out. They're still birds, and sometimes they will just look away when you wanted them to look at you. And this guy, I got a nice exposure on him, but all I can tell about his face is he's got a little tuft of feather on the top of his head. So some brief definitions or terms. Exposure is the amount of light reaching your sensor. Dominating the exposure will give you complete creative control over what appears illuminated in your images and what doesn't. There are 3 variables to consider: aperture, shutter speed, and ISO. Basically, aperture or f-stop is the hole through which the light travels. The bigger the number, the smaller the hole. So an f22 is a small hole, and f2.8 is a large. The shutter is a kind of a curtain that allows light to pass through to the sensor for a certain period of time. So the slower the shutter speed, the more light will be collected by the sensor. And the ISO is the tricky one. It's a measure of sensor sensitivity. The higher the ISO, the more the signal will be amplified, and therefore the sensor will seem to have captured more light. And then just for clarification, a stop is a relative measure of the amount of light reaching the sensor. If you double the light, you have increased the exposure by 1 stop. We're getting the basic stuffs under control. So what happens when we make changes? Well, this becomes the art of and science of compromise. So when you change the aperture, it controls the depth of field, and that is the distance in front of and behind the subject, which appears acceptably sharp. Shutter speed will determine motion blur, and that's motion due to the subject moving or your camera. Sometimes you want blur and sometimes you don't. And ISO, of course, is sensor sensitivity, and it will influence the noise in the photo. And that's the graininess if you see in photos you've taken in really, really low light. So OMG, what will I do? So just as an example of exposure, I have defined the lower left as a properly exposed photo of a red-winged blackbird. I've increased it by 1 stop in the upper right, so it's overexposed by 1 stop. And on the bottom right, it's underexposed by 1 stop. So if you're getting silhouetted birds, they're underexposed. If the background is blown out and contains little detail, it may be overexposed. So it's good to be aware that this exists. I put in this one on metering modes. It's just worth mentioning that most of us will use a matrix meter or maybe even a spot meter. And a metering mode is what your camera uses to determine how much light is enough. So I'm not going to get into a lot of details. If there are questions on that later, we can certainly get into that. So my preferred settings. These are a good place to start, and I want to emphasize start because there are times when you'll make different selections, but regardless of the camera or the lens that you have. And this will cause a little bit of panic, but set your camera to manual mode. These are the choices that I make, and I get happy results doing so. Set the aperture to f8 to start. My rule is that f8 and everything's great when it comes to bird photography. Shutter speed to 1/1000th of a second for stationary birds. They're a little flighty or twitchy, and this will give you the best starting point. Now, if you're shooting birds in flight, you want to go up to 1/2000th and maybe even quicker than that in order to capture a sharp photo. Set your ISO to automatic. And again, this will be different from what a lot of people are used to, but this will take up the slack because you've already determined the aperture and the shutter speed. So if there's a variable amount of light, it needs to get taken up in the ISO setting. I like autofocus continuous mode with a single point of focus. I'm shooting a Nikon camera, and that's one of the options. There's a servo mode in Canon. This gives me the most versatile option. There are a lot of other options that you can dig into, but this one works 90% of the time or more. In terms of file format, I shoot RAW, not JPEG. And if you plan to do any post-processing, then this is the way to go. You get far more information in a RAW file than you do in the compressed JPEG file. Again, because I post-process, I can set my white balance to automatic. And that's just a good setting. In the last year, I have discovered back button focus, and this is a spectacular option for shooting things that like to move. Essentially what that does is it takes the focus function from the half depress the shutter to a button on the back of the camera, so you can establish focus before you even put your finger on the shutter. This has tripled my keeper rates, and I wish I had tried that before. I also use high-speed continuous shooting to catch the action. My camera high speed is 6.5 frames a second. I usually take 2 or 3 at a time. This is not spray and pray, you know, where you close your eyes and point your camera in the general direction and blast off 20 shots. Don't do that. That's just gambling. With regards to the gear that I use, I am a Nikon shooter. So I bought the D750 full frame, 25 megapixel DSLR in 2015. The lens options I have for birds, I've got one other, the kit lens that came with it was a 24 to 120. I've taken a number of shots with that. A telephoto lens of a 70 to 200 f2.8 lens, and a super telephoto lens, love of my life, 200 to 500 f5.6, coupled with a 1.4 teleconverter, which gives me even more reach. So I can be stealthy, but I don't have to be as stealthy, sneaking up on the birds. So that one gives me a 280 to 700 reach, which is really quite nice. I do hand carry a lot because I'm hiking through fields and bushes and what have you. The camera and super telephoto lens combination weighs about 8 pounds, so it's not insignificant. So I use the Black Rapid shoulder strap. It just hangs the camera by my hip and it's ready to pull up and shoot at a moment's notice. I also will occasionally or often use a monopod with a ball head if I'm going to be stationary for a while and still want some mobility. And I may take a tripod if I'm not hiking too far because they can weigh a little bit. A couple of hints, and this is lessons I've learned by not doing them. Clean your lens first before you leave the house. I do that every day, sometimes several times. Check your settings before you see a bird. Nothing's more frustrating than having to fumble with dials and knobs on your camera when there's good bird action going on in front of you. And then check your battery. Maybe even have a spare charged battery. I say charged because taking a spent battery along won't help at all. Lesson learned. Briefly, post-processing. Here our intent is to refine the image for composition, exposure, color, and contrast to reveal the subject in the best light practical. It's very, very easy to be heavy-handed, and so the notion that some is good and more is better often backfires. Oversaturation of colors, excessive sharpening to compensate for poor focus are the most common failures. So start with a good image and apply a light touch. I personally use the Adobe Creative Cloud subscription, which has Lightroom, which is my go-to software, and then Photoshop as well. And I've also recently added some Topaz denoise software, which I find to be quite useful. Quick example of some light touch post-processing. I know this is not a bird, but it has wings, so it qualified. This is a Milbert's tortoiseshell butterfly, just in my my backyard. Shot at f8 as I had suggested on 1/1000th of a second, and the camera gave me ISO 720. So all I did was just crop it in and maybe pull some shadows out to get a better look at the butterfly. So not an awful lot that needed to be done there. And again, you don't want to crop too much and end up giving away too much of the photo. Now here's one where it looks like I've broken all my rules. This is a cedar waxwing. It's about 40 feet away in my neighbor's oak tree. I did start off at f8 and 1/1000th, and it gave me an ISO of 12,800. So I said, well, that's pretty noisy potentially. The bird is sitting quite still, so let's slow down the shutter speed to 1/400th. And then the other challenge with cedar waxwings is they're almost soft focused by nature. So to give me a greater depth of field, I just kicked up the f-stop to f11, which gave me a greater probability that the whole bird, tail and eyes would be in focus. And I was happy with the result here. So, and then I just cropped it in and denoised it a little bit. So there was a little bit of grain in the background. And so the topaz denoise helped clear that up a bit. Just within the last month or so, learned how to use content-aware patch tool in Photoshop. So I just was playing with this one. So this is something that you can do. If there's a stick in there or a branch that doesn't serve the photo, apparently you can take it out, which is really quite cool. Now, I put this one in as an example of the value of shooting in RAW. So this was with just the telephoto lens, walking around out at Guelph Lake, and there's a pair of Merlins sitting out there. The lighting was terrible, really overcast, gray sky, and essentially looked like a black and white photo. Shot f8 1/1000, give me an ISO of 2200. But because it's a raw shot, there was all that information of color and detail was in there. So with Lightroom, I could crop it, adjust it for exposure, just to boost the exposure a bit, pull some shadows out, and maybe touch up the texture, which is a contrast feature. And I didn't bother to denoise. But it's neat that all of that information is right there, and it helps with ID and shows you a good looking bird. Sometimes you cannot save a poor shot. So I get lots of those. So same settings, f8 1/1000, a common grackle in the morning sun, nice and bright. So I got an ISO of 100. My camera thought the best place to focus in that moment was the feet rather than the face. And so I got that. Again, I was playing with Photoshop because I just learned how to do that. So I thought, well, let's take the branches out and see if that saves it. And it didn't. So I got still a bit of motion blur in the wing, which is fine. It shows motion. And the color, I overdid it on the color. It's a way too vibrant. So lesson learned, don't get too aggressive. Now let's go into birds in flight, that particular brand of insanity that I enjoy. The rule about get close to the birds needs to be modified to don't get so close to the birds if they're going to be in flight. I got a lot of shots that look like this, either the place the bird used to be or the tail of our part bird, one way or the other. That's a chickadee, by the way. So move back a little bit. A few shots in here that look like I don't know what I'm doing. Just my turbo duck, I kind of like the picture. It was shot a couple of years ago while I was still on auto mode on my camera. So that's landscape setting with panning. So shutter speed wasn't fast enough. It made an interesting shot, but that really wasn't what I was expecting. Take the shot anyways. Most of my bird shots are the north end of a bird heading south. I was delighted that I got the bird in the frame and probably could have gone with a higher shutter speed on this one, but I didn't have time to. Nice little Cooper's hawk in the backyard. So birds in flight or birds in motion are always interesting. It's a little starling rather, just taking a bath in our bird bath, probably at 1/2500th of a second. It makes an interesting shot. This is an osprey with lunch in Florida. Now, the bigger the bird, the less you need to go to the faster shutter speeds because they don't flap their wings as quickly. And as long as they're not moving so fast that you can't keep them in frame, then you can go with 1/1000th. This was probably about 3 years ago. There's a osprey nesting site right near Aramosa. And I discovered the hard way that if you walk along the side of the road, they don't like that and they will fly at you. So it was nice to be able to get the eyes in focus, and with a little bit of post-processing, take the shadows out from underneath so you get some good detail. And that one just tells the story. There's some not happiness going on there. Against the blue sky, a great blue heron, just about 10 minutes walk from my home in North Guelph. Again, a little post-processing to pull some shadows out under the wings, give me a nice shot. And I've got good focus on the eye and the face, so I was happy with that one. And then a little bit further away, there were lots of weeds in front of me, so I cropped it in a little bit tight. The heron just landed in the pond and within seconds was chased away by a bunch of Canada geese. Didn't want to share. In the fall of 2018, I had a chance to go on a fishing trip, late October, actually, to the Grand Coulee Dam and Lake Roosevelt in Washington State. And there, the bald eagles will fly right down to see if you've got any fish. So, and that trap, I took my kit lens, my 24-120, but had the shutter speed fairly fast and was able to capture nice focus and interesting shot. And you can get a couple of shots along those lines. If you can get the pinion feathers straining against the air, then that looks even better. Birds in flight can really add a nice point of interest to a landscape shot. So it's always fun to be able to capture something like this. Again, out at Washington State on Lake Roosevelt. Kingfishers really annoy me. My life's mission is to get a decent in-flight shot of a kingfisher that's not 150 yards away. So I take the shot anyways, just in case something interesting appears, and you've got a couple of wing positions there. I got one nice focus in the clear sky, nothing interesting around, but still a better shot. But I still have as my bucket list to get a spectacular shot of a kingfisher doing something interesting, perhaps diving into the water. I love shooting mallard drakes. They have a ton of color. There's all kinds of them around, so there's lots of time and room to practice. Great colors, just got the settings right. I got the focus on the eyes, the wing position was where I wanted it, and I was just happy with that one. And another one from a compositional point of view would be nice if he was back, but it kind of tells the story of this guy taking off and leaving, exit stage right. Little juncos are characters, and this will sort of demonstrate why a fast burst will give you an interesting story. So these 3 shots are probably taken in less than a second or thereabouts. So this poor guy sitting on the feeder minding his own business, his buddy comes along and says something rude to him, and then grabs him by the face, and then proceeds to knock him off. He's just hanging on by one toe there. So that's always fun if you can get that. And I think that's probably still shot at only 1/1000th. There's a little blur. It might have been a bit faster. Again, if you can get a little bit of space ahead of the bird, and if you like the lines, get the focus on the eye, and it makes a neat shot. That's a brown booby from the cruise we took in January. Hoping cruising comes back. We did have a chance to spend a week in the Galapagos in September of 2019, and it's always a fun place to be. You do not need to take a long lens to the Galapagos. Everything stays really, really close. It can present a problem for you if you're not careful. So this is a swallowtail gull from above, and another one from below. Again, getting the exposure right and the focus on the eye is the mission there. a different challenge on an overcast sky and a brownish bird, but still able to get, I think, a decent shot. This waved albatross, also in the Galapagos. Sometimes it's fun to do the silhouette. I mean, silhouettes can happen to us all the time when we don't want them to, but just down the corner, I think that's a crow. It might be a raven now that you hear what Val has to say, but I think it's a crow making a pass across the sunset sky. Same evening, going the other direction. A nice shot of a turkey vulture, and nice to see the lights that are peeking through his little nostril port there. It's always fun to catch birds in a spread wing position, so you can get more detail on their tail feathers and the little red tips on their wings and what have you. This shot was taken out my kitchen window, so I've got a little perch that they can sit on there while they're looking at the bird seeds we set out. This is in Florida, obviously an osprey. I was walking towards this one sitting on a perch, and he or she took off, and I took the shot anyways. The focus being on the eye and the beak makes it a decent photo. You can see the curl of the talons, and the fact that other portions of it are a little blurry is irrelevant. It's one of my favorite shots, also in Florida, the wood stork in reasonably low light. I just love the colors that appeared, the shape of the wing sort of matching the contour of that beautiful face, and the perfect form of clasping his feet together, his or hers, as they take off. So I was happy with that. Probably at 1/1000th of a second because it's a big bird. Take the shots even in low light. The focus isn't good on the tricolored heron, but it ended up making an interesting photo. This was f6.3 because the light was reasonably low. Under a walkway, I just love the shadow, and there's actually two shadows, one of the sun directly on the bird and one of the above that of the sun reflecting off the water. And again, another shot that just made me happy. Juncos, if you watch these guys, they're always fighting. They rarely seem to get along. This was last fall. Obviously, you can tell by the fall colors, but they were little aerial battle going on, which I was able to catch. And that would be at 1/2000th of a second. Just last week or so, there were all kinds of blue jays training their young how to steal food from others. And so I managed to snap this shot from about 40 feet away. Again, leave some room ahead, try and anticipate where they're going, and make sure, again, continuous focus and high shutter speed. Last week at Guelph Lake, a female oriole was out harvesting some apple blossoms and put on a little leap for me. So what I want to do is just take a moment and show some of my earlier photos, and this before I used continuous focus and before I set the ISO to auto, just shooting in aperture mode or whatever. And I'll just show you what I was getting there. So a blue jay sitting on one of our solar lamps. Nice shot. Down at Point Pelee, looking at yellow warblers. Sort of a rookie move to zoom in way too tight to try and get the detail, and probably shot wide open at f5.6. And so the depth of field is poorish. The tail is out of focus, but still not a bad shot and interesting. A little sparkle in the eye. Also at Point Pelee, catching an oriole, trying to steal a bug out of a spider web was kind of fun. Again, look at the sparkle in the eye as something I was looking for. Nice to catch a prothonotary warbler. I like the shape of the twig, sort of framing the bird, but hindsight would have been smart or helpful to take a step to the left to get that large tree trunk out of the way in composing the photo. And another prothonotary, fairly soft focus beyond the face, but still not a bad shot. Again, like this one with the sparkle in the eye, makes you wonder if he ever steps on any of those thorns. And then just essentially a documentary type of photo of black-throated green warbler from about 3 years ago. We have an indigo bunting who shows up. Would have been nice had I not clipped the American goldfinch, and if the goldfinch had a look towards the camera. But you take the shot when you get a chance. This is not a bird. I just thought I'd share with you that we have a pole dancing chipmunk in our backyard, and he's really good at the posture, and I just had to capture him for posterity. And if you're ready, there's all sorts of stuff that will show up that's interesting. Little opossum stealing some bird seeds off our deck. Up at Wyerton, just sitting on the grass, minding my own business, and I don't know who was more surprised, me or the fox snake. Could have gotten a better picture, but I didn't want to take any more time. We back on the conservation area, so we get all kinds of stuff that shows up in our backyard. And this Cooper's hawk, while I was just sitting out on the back deck enjoying a refreshing adult beverage, he came zooming in and tried to take our little chipmunk. So I captured his portrait. This is a captive bird. It was part of a raptor show with a licensed professional. It's a great opportunity to practice some of your photography when things aren't flying away really, really quickly or what have you. So I was pleased to capture this rather noble profile. Occasionally, there's other people out there who will notice you looking for birds. That's just down on the Speed River. Again, kingfishers are my nemesis. They're really difficult to get because they won't stick around. So this one's a little soft focus. But what happened next was the interesting bit. Again, not a great photo, but this red-winged blackbird came along and just trashed Mrs. Kingfisher right into the river, and I managed to capture that. So that was a sort of an interesting story. And a juvenile hawk sitting on the fence in my backyard, just checking out my bird feeders, totally misunderstood why they were there. You can see it's all shrouded over because it's raining heavily, so it's low light. But again, focus is where I want it to be. And then birds in flight will give you a challenge. There's we're kind of flipping the bird up here. Again, out at Guelph Lake, there's some eastern bluebirds there, and it's really tough to get anything but a silhouette. So the advantage of shooting in RAW is that you can get the shot and then try and recover. The bird was small enough that I couldn't get a spot focus on it or a spot meter on it. So at least with all the information in the RAW file, you can get a shot, at least you can identify the bird. You have to be careful in Florida. Some of the bullfrogs are huge. So, and that's the advantage of a long lens. You do not want to get close to these guys. Apparently they bite. I think this is correctly called a northern shrike, but he was sitting up nicely isolated, happy with the posture and the sparkle in the eye. Again, same sort of thing. Beautiful plumage on this great blue heron, again in Florida, and I was quite happy with the way that turned out. There's all sorts of other things you can take pictures of. These little guys are great. Wish I'd stepped back a little bit to get his whole tail in the picture, but still got a nice photo. So in our backyard, there are gray catbirds who are usually pretty spooky, but this one standing on alert, again, happy with the focus and the depth of field. And then he or she just jumped in and enjoyed the bath. 1/2000th of a second, get a nice spray of water that shows some pretty good hip action. So that was kind of a fun shot as well. Next shot, we had a chance to go to the Galapagos in September 2019. It's been 4 days in Quito, and I just love this shot. It's up at 13,775 feet above the sea level. I took the wrong lens with me. I should have had a wide angle lens so that I can get some depth of field, but nonetheless, a happy shot. So whatever skills you have for shooting birds or whatever, you can apply that to just about anything. Over to the botanical gardens in Quito. This is a masked indigo flower piercer. Gorgeous little bird. Of course, out to the Galapagos, you just got to have a picture of a tortoise. These guys are amazing. This guy's probably close to 100 years of age. In the Galapagos, of course, the 70 to 200 lens is plenty. They tell you to stay 6 feet away from the creatures, but they will get closer and they show no fear. So as a photographer of birds, as I'm getting close, I'm 30, 40 feet away, I'm snapping pictures until you walk right up and they'll almost let you touch them. So you have to learn how to behave differently in different areas. You can catch conversations going on. I think they were talking about the previous group of tourists. You can get a nice close-up. These are Nazca boobies, by the way. The magnificent frigate birds have this inflated chest post, the males, and they fly around like this, trying to impress the ladies, apparently. A difficult shot, blackbird against the blue sky, but again, shooting in raw and post, pulling out some shadows, you can still get a decent shot. Same sort of situation. This guy's trying to impress the kids, I think, at this point. Have to get a blue booby, a blue-footed booby. Astounded at the size of the chicks. Look bigger than the parents. And you've got to get a couple of comical shots when you're there. This little guy was just right next to me and having a good look, so we captured his portrait. The young baby frigate birds are very not cute, so capture these guys. And for some reason or his eyes are just black in a number of the shots that I got of these guys. They don't seem to have any life in their eyes. Like this guy, it kind of reminds me of Prince Harry. I'm not sure why, but pleased me. And then just looking around the landscape, it astounds me that the bird can hang on to that single stick in this almost gale force wind up there, but he was just sitting there stationary as can be. Galapagos hawk, juvenile. Again, I've got about a dozen shots as I was walking close, and he was probably 10 feet up on this branch. You walk right under him quickly because you never know. In the Galapagos, half the birds are named Galapagos and the other half are named Darwin, but this is just a little flycatcher. Would sit and look at us. Got a photo of a short-eared owl. Again, you have to stay on the path. In it was hard to get back far enough to get a decent shot, put the whole bird in the photo. So I just cropped them in this way. And the eyes are gorgeous, and the texture and color of the surroundings were amazing. Slow motion argument, same sort of principles, get the focus and tell a story. I told a number of folks that giant tortoises actually sing if you're not looking. January last year, the last time we could travel, we had taken a cruise from San Diego to Fort Lauderdale through the Panama Canal and stopped for a bit in Mexico and managed to capture this beautiful golden-fronted woodpecker. And of course, and anything with an eye and some nice color will catch my attention. And here's a female green iguana in Mexico. And the male, who looks like I feel right now and that he needs a haircut. The great-tailed grackles in Mexico are huge. They're almost the size of a crow. So glorious birds. Great kiskadee. A little bit in the shadow. Probably could have done more to pull out the shadows around the eyes in post-processing, but again, wanted to take a relatively light touch. Photographing hummingbirds in Costa Rica in the cloud forest is a real challenge. One, it's cloudy, and two, it's in a forest, so it's shaded. So I managed to get a bunch of these shots where they were perched because motion blur was just killing them. But that's a green ground brilliant. And then I managed to find a white-bellied mountain gem, a beautiful little bird, just sitting on edge of the feeder. And then the fork-tailed wood nymph. Again, shot at ISO 12,800, so it's a fairly decent shot. You can see on the tail the graininess that I was not able to take care of. So there are limits to what you can do in certain circumstances. Just last winter on the Speed River Trail, found a pileated woodpecker who will sit still long enough for me. Compositionally, I probably should have included more of the tree trunk in the photo, but fundamentally, I got the eye and the yellow patch to tell me I've got a male woodpecker, and again, happy with that shot. Challenge with common mergansers on the Speed River is they do enjoy being on the other side of the river and generally try to stay in the shadows, or they fly away really, really fast. So it's always nice when you can capture a little bit of detail in these rather contrasty birds. And of course, having a little attention deficit disorder myself, if anything moves in front of me, I take a picture of it. And I found last year that I was fascinated at the number of different species of dragonflies that exist out there. Same sort of principles. Now I'm getting relatively close to these guys and using a monopod just to stabilize, and going up to f14 for depth of field with my long lens. And there's the male meadowhawk dragonfly. They're about 1.5 inches long, cute little guys. And happening on this Halloween pennant dragonfly was a happy circumstance. So gorgeous, gorgeous little creatures. And again, walking the trail, looking for birds, keep your eyes and ears open. And there's a carpenter bee just catching a few rays on a wildflower. Again, really happy with that shot. I'm not sure this is correct. I know it's an American black duck, but I'm told that that is eclipse plumage. I don't know enough about that, but perhaps there are birders in the crowd that will confirm or deny that. Sometimes it's worthwhile looking over your shoulder to see if there's anybody watching you. Little gray squirrels are always keeping an eye on me. And that's also an eastern gray squirrel with the black squirrel variants. And this was last winter, just getting ready for the snow to fly. He'd got his winter coat on and had food on his face. And I thought that was an interesting shot. Again, a lot of my shots, I've got a deck rail out that we put a few seeds out, will be taken through the kitchen window. So I'm about 15 feet away, and it gives me a chance to just keep an eye on these guys and see if I can get a really fairly decent shot. Again, I'm looking for texture and light on the eye and a little bit of composition or something interesting going on. There we are, standing at attention, checking out what else is going on. A beautiful little American tree sparrow sat there and was nibbling away on some seeds. A little Marilyn Monroe action there with a updraft, which I thought was interesting. We have an ornamental pear in our backyard up against the deck, and it attracts all kinds of birds, including this little house finch male. He was just clearly by his face, he was nibbling on ornamental pears. Sometimes looking for birds, again, you stop and look around and there are some fascinating other creatures that show up. This is a Aphrodite fritillary butterfly. And if you just look at the eyes, they're just amazing. And I was happy to get, out of focus background that wasn't cluttered with anything else. Also in our pear tree, Mr. Cardinal takes a over-the-shoulder glance. I think I heard him say, "Hello, ladies," but I'm not sure. And blue jays can be a challenge, a different color tone, and they are very fast. Heading around Speed River Trail, I think this was in February this year, a great blue heron. I was actually surprised to know that many of them overwinter here. This chap did not seem to be happy about the temperature of the snow, but he stood quietly for me. Another dark-eyed junco, just practicing what kind of a detail shot I can get. Little American goldfinch in his winter plumage. Out at Guelph Lake, just walking along there, the red-bellied woodpecker was good enough to sit out on the sunny side. Normal behavior for woodpeckers is to go to the other side of the tree. This guy must have gotten confused and gave me a nice shot. Whether we agree with it or not, but there's chickadees that will come out and eat seeds out of your hand. I introduced a number of people to this activity, and it's really gets people interested in wildlife, and it's really quite magical to have a little 11 to 12 gram bird sitting on your fingers, having a look at some seeds, including these little red-breasted nuthatches. Again, putting that perch in the back, you get more of a natural setting, captures some detail of these birds. As I see, I'm using up all my time, aren't I? Let me go through some photos rather quickly here. Got a few more. Nuthatch, blue jays, the robin before he did this. Those pine siskins in their social skills, they don't seem to get along very well. And certainly the male mourning dove. John Travolta action. I'm going through these rather quickly because I'm saying I'm approaching the hour time limit. red-winged blackbird, little common redpoll. It's nice to see a brown-headed cowbird having a peek at me. Got a couple of shots there. This one we've seen. Cooper's hawk, all fluffed up after taking a poop over the back of the branch. Came back the next day and gave me a different view. Mourning doves are getting all smoochy. My wife says I shouldn't show this one. Chickadee attacking a dog toy in my neighbor's yard. Of course, out at Guelph Lake, the goslings are arriving or have arrived. This little guy, I named him Ryan. I'm not sure why. He seems to be attracted by the dandelion. And again, I got a couple of shots of the merlins sitting out there with the longer lens. Killdeers by the lake. And the beauty of a long lens is that you don't have to get in and frighten them away. That's the nest in the gravel parking lot. And the egg, of course, from quite a distance back. Little bird behavior. The brown thrashers out there belting out a medley of songs. Chipping sparrow, I've got a couple of these guys. Again, looking for composition and focus on the eyes. The iridescence of the tree swallows is amazing. The white crowned sparrow in the backyard. And then just looking out our front windows, beautiful pair of house finches were courting. And it was nice to capture some of that activity. At a Guelph Lake, the female orioles, a little house wren also out at Guelph Lake. Beautiful texture on those little birds. Eastern kingbirds, lots of people are getting those. Merganser, I love the focus on the eye and the fact that she's all drenched down from fishing. And then as we approach the end, keys to success are at hand. So hopefully you picked up one or two. And don't forget to take time to smell the flowers. And that concludes my presentation. And Val, I'll turn it back to you. And if there are any questions, if there's time.
Thank you so much, Stuart. That was wonderful. I'm sorry I neglected to mention beforehand that we would take questions by the chat. Sorry, I'm invisible. Dean, are you available? We had a few questions through the chat. Are you available to read them and get Stuart's response? All right. Stu, I know we had a few questions.
Okay.
I will start from the top. Actually, the first question was, what do you use to clean your lens?
Fluid and sort of any of the camera shops provide a little lens cleaning cloth, the lint-free cloth that takes a couple of seconds. Spray the stuff on the cloth and then not on the lens. Okay.
Yeah, similar to what you'd use for bird watching optics. When taking birds in flight, taking pictures, I guess, do you rely more on high speed settings or panning or both?
Probably both. Again, I want to zoom back a little bit so that I've got room for them to fly into. But if they're moving, I'll be panning and then blasting off 2 or 3 shots at the same time. And go with a high speed shutter speed, 1/2000th of a second, or maybe up to 1/3000th of a second.
Thank you. There was concern some people can't carry such a heavy camera. Do you have any suggestions for lighter gear?
Well, you can get, a lot of my friends are saying there's no chance I'm carrying an 8-pound lens out there. Certainly some of the newer mirrorless cameras and lenses are lighter. And of course, there are other lenses that are lighter and still zoom quite a bit. So I don't have a lot of experience